Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to start our meeting tonight. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the South Texas Section AIChE March meeting. We are here at this location, the Bougainvillas, and this is going to be our agenda for tonight. We started with some workshops, then we have a networking time, and then we're going to have our dinner, and I'm going to proceed to start the announcements. After that, we're going to have a break, and then we're going to have our main presentation. It's my pleasure to introduce the executive board for the South Texas section. In case you guys are present here tonight, please stand up so we can recognize you. Tom Rem, Deborah McCall, Yurika Villalobos, David Rosenthal, Sanjay Sharma, Sheena Reeves, Aniket Patrantar, Jimmy Kumana, Swarup Bade, and Matt Kolodny. Please join me with a big round of applause. It will not be possible to accomplish so many things that we have accomplished in the recent months, in the recent years, without our volunteers. And sometimes volunteers is a labor that they do it from heart. They are volunteers, they come, they serve, and they accomplish too many things in the organization. I'm going to proceed to talk about our different events. Through the year, we have many different meetings. We usually have meetings every first Thursday of every month at different locations. We try to balance, because since Houston is a big metropolitan city, we have many locations balancing the east and the west. So our next meeting is going to be in the east part of town at the new location, Chaffee Hall and Garden. And then in April, we're going to return to the Bougainvillas. We're going to have a summer break coming back here. And in October, we're going to have in Moody Gardens our meeting as part of the South Process Technology Conference, and then going back to the east in November. We'll keep you updated, and so please stay tuned for the upcoming events. So far this year, we have a program called the Season Pass. This year we have 37, actually I believe it's 38 now, Season Pass members. That means these people paid for like an annual membership, and they are able to come to the meetings at a discounted price. They are able to get a badge, a customized badge with their names, and also they have visibility in our newsletter and in our website of being a Season Pass. So we really recommend you that if you can sign for next year, do it in advance, so that way it's easier for you, it's convenient, saves time and saves money. Also, if you want to participate, or your company wants to participate as a sponsor, we receive sponsors anytime, so please let us know if in case your company is interested in being part of our meetings as a sponsor. We have different packages. The first package is a bronze, then we have the silver, and then we have gold. For more details, we have this lineup in the website, or you can contact any of us and we'll provide you the details. Last year, we have very good companies representing us as sponsors. As you can see on this slide, we have over 10, and these companies sponsor us in different meetings. We also have our Southwest Process Technology Conference, and we also have many different good organizations that were part of our event. I would like to call Dennis. Then you want to make the announcements. This year, it marks a very important milestone for the South Texas section. It's the 75th anniversary. And please, Dennis.
Hi, everybody. Well, we're a little more than 75 years old. And a lot of things have changed in Houston for the last 7 decades. But we're going to have a big celebration in November. It looks like we're zeroing in. We've been going to a bunch of different potential locations, and we're zeroing in on a venue. It'll probably be on the Saturday, the 3rd of November. So save the date. More announcements will come once we, finalize the contract. But it's going to be a really, great celebration. and I think everybody will really enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. And thanks to all of you, because without you, it will not be possible to accomplish these milestones. It's the Diamond Celebration, so stay tuned for more details. Also, what is the way of communications that we use? We use many different ways to communicate, mainly through our newsletter, our mailing list, but we also have social media. We are trying to incorporate many different ways to send out the messages about meetings, about events. And if you happen to have your Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn page, we are there. So anytime that you get your smartphone, try to sign up for these places, or recommend these places to someone that wants to get more information about the group. I'm going to call Sanjay he's going to keep our education section. Sanjay?
Thank you, Carlos. First of all, I want to thank our speakers today for the workshops, Nathan Lott from Dipper and Jim Wark from, okay, well, this is, right now I'm from the last week's February meeting. I want to take this opportunity and thank the speaker last time. Let me see. Jerry Forrest. He talked about safety, and that was a very well attended workshop. And so I want to take this opportunity to thank Jerry. Then we have today's dinner presentation on modeling from Peter, and I really like the simulation work. So look forward to a interesting presentation from Peter. Just saw him in the line a few minutes ago. And now I want to take this opportunity to thank Nathan. He came all the way from New York to give a workshop on physical properties. Thank you. And I want to thank Jim, came from Culligan, to talk about different technologies in water treatment. Both workshops are really interesting, just kind of torn in between which one to attend. So having said that, I also want to mention that if you guys, any one of you, want to conduct a workshop, because so many of our members, they have a wealth of experience, and please share the knowledge. Please reach out to any of the executive committee members, or you contact me, and we can arrange for a workshop for you guys to share the knowledge. And lastly, I want to mention is that many members, they look for PDF certificate for attending the dinner presentation or the workshop. Please, if you are interested, please sign. There is a sign-in sheet at the desk, a registration desk. Please sign your name or leave your business card, and I'll try to get the PDF certificate out to you guys as quickly as possible, maybe within a week or so. All right, well, that's all I have. Thank you, Carlos.
Okay. Thank you, Sanjay. Our next meeting is going to be at the Chaffee Hall and Garden. It's going to be April the 5th, so you guys can be prepared. It's going to be Vinod Raj Kumar from Bechtel. He's going to talk about the trends in LNG. Bigger isn't always better. That's the name of his presentation, and he's going to talk about how the mid-scale liquefaction is affecting the market and why it's so attractive these days. Sometimes we see a lot of new projects in the Gulf of Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, very big projects that are coming down, but he wants to talk about the mid-size company. So it's going to be a very interesting presentation, and we hope that you join us. We also have the Energy Management Forum next month. This is organized by the Texas Industries of the Future. We're going to have more details down the road in the next few days. So stay tuned. This is part of the workshops that we have on that day. It's going to be at the same venue, and it's going to start around 4. So just we will send you more information. Now I would like to call Sheena. Sheena is going to introduce the student chapters and the activities related to the schools.
Okay, good evening, everyone. For those that do not know, the South Texas section supports 4 universities in the Houston area, the first being Prairie View A&M University, the University of Houston, Texas A&M University, and Rice University. Each year we support them with scholarships, and tonight we have 3 of our 4 schools here, and I'm actually going to allow them to introduce themselves this year. So you won't get tired of hearing my voice for 9 students, okay? Okay. Up first, we're going to have our 3 students from Prairie View A&M University, and I'm going to ask you guys to come now, and one by one, you can come up to the stage, introduce yourself, and tell everyone here a little bit about the volunteer work that you do.
Hello, my name is Cale Schutzeberg, or it says Justin, but I go by my middle name. And so this whole year I was the volunteering chair or community outreach chair for PVAMU AICHE chapter. And so I revolved most of our volunteering events around the Houston Food Bank, and this was nice. It was kind of a 1-hour drive, but it was good because I got to carpool people every time. And I don't know the exact numbers, but I tried to add it all up, and I think we supported like around 40,000 meals, so that's nice. And it was also good because we got to network with people, because we would sometimes go when other organizations were going related to chemical engineering. And okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Letitia Salzman. I'm a junior at Prairie View University. I'm also a part of the AIChE chapter, and I volunteered with the food bank for AIChE, and I also volunteered with the mentor-mentee program, assisting, and mentoring young chemical engineers.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Ozemna Anyibu. I'm a chemical engineering senior, graduating in May. I was the 2016-2017 conference chair, and I was during that period I had helped to make sure that we have a large amount of number of students that attend the process technology conference, and I'm also involved in the school helping to go to some of the elementary schools around and high schools to speak to them the need that they need to do well in order to be able to get into STEM degree. Thank you.
The next university is actually Rice University, but believe it or not, they all had the same exam tonight. So we excuse all 3 of these students, and they will receive their awards and be recognized hopefully next month if they don't have another exam. Okay. So the next university we're going to recognize now is the Texas A&M University, who managed to travel here, so we're actually proud of them for that. Prairie, if you could come back up and actually receive your scholarship.
Should I wait for them?
No, you can go ahead.
Hello, my name is Max Dwan, and I am a senior at Texas A&M University. I've been involved with a lot of different functions within AICHE at Texas A&M, serving for mentorship roles and other things to promote student success in our department. And on top of that, I used to work the new student conferences at A&M, welcoming over 50,000 students every summer. So that is what I have done.
Thank you, Max.
All right, howdy. My name is Gwendolyn Yonda. I am a junior chemical engineering student at Texas A&M University. I am currently serving on the board of our student chapter, but outside of AICHE, I actually volunteer on a weekly basis with the poor community of Bryan, which is our neighboring community. I go on a weekly basis to volunteer at the Community Closet as a part of Twin City Missions, which is a nonprofit organization. And then when I'm not able to go during the week because they have little weird hours, I go on Sundays to volunteer with a potluck lunch that we provide for the homeless of Bryan.
Howdy. My name's Christian Walsh. I'm a senior at Texas A&M University. Through AIChE, I'm involved with the mentorship program, and I volunteer at the big event on campus and also with the Spark conference on campus. Additionally, I run the ChemiCar program in our chapter and help by measuring student interests and representing those to the department and the College of Engineering. Thanks.
And last but not least, the home-based school, I guess, the University of Houston. Anyone can be first.
Hello, I'm Christine Stroh. I'm a junior, and I work a lot with helping younger girls pursue a career with STEM, and I work a lot with Engineers Without Borders with improving a water distribution system in Nicaragua.
Hello, I'm Taylor Hedke, and I'm a junior also. I work with the student chapter of AIChE, and I'm on the outreach committee where I go to a local charter school, and I work with elementary school-aged girls to promote STEM and get them excited about science.
Hello, my name is Tao Bing Wen, and I'm a junior chemical engineering from the University of Houston. I volunteer to be a tutor for ACS chapter at the University of Houston, and I also volunteer at the Houston Food Bank often. Thank you.
So as everyone could see, our student chapter members are very involved in the community, and to that effect, we're actually going to institute a few new awards this year. They're going to be more of a merit-based awards to go with our scholarships that the students at these chapters can apply for. And hopefully we will award the first ones maybe sometime around the 75th celebration. So you'll hear more about those particular awards because we think we need to honor our students at our student chapters a little more. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheena, and thank you all thank you to all the scholarship recipients. It's a good opportunity to see young people coming into our meetings, especially the students, because this is the future, and we are looking forward to see you as professionals and interacting with us in the future. Okay, now we're gonna move into the K-12 activities. I would like to call Matt Kolotny. He's gonna give us the presentation for this section.
Thank you, Carlos. First thing that happened was the science fair, which happened last Saturday. I guess I need to stay back. Am I getting too much feedback on here? Okay, we have pictures here of the Okay, here it's the people. We got 14 or 15 people to judge. I don't have the names here, but I can recognize some of them. Stand when I call your name, Sheena Reeves. And let's see, I guess Ken Walder isn't here, but he helped. And Pete Garside, thank you. And Satyat Verma, thank you. Okay, I'm in there. Eureka Biawas, and she helped bring the food for us. And Paul Waits. And I'm sorry, I should have written these down, and I'm trying to, it's hard to see everybody. Gianna Pietrangeli, and Peter Williams, and Cecilia Burns, and Nicholas Collette. And I think I've got everybody. And then in addition, we were do a special award for AICHE, and we gave 2 awards in the junior division and 2 awards in the senior division. We also recommended somebody else for summer internship at the Houston Museum of Natural Science. And we'd like to thank Dr. Carolyn Sumners for her help with that. And then for place award judges, we had could Julie White stand? She was the coordinating judge for the place awards in the material science division. So can we give some applause for all these people? And then coming up, we don't have much going on in March, but in April, unfortunately, we have 3 events, separate events coming together. They're only a week apart. On Saturday, April 14th, we're having the Houston Independent School District has their When I Grow Up career fair, and the same day is the annual Boy Scout fair, and we'll be probably looking for about 5 or 6 judges, not judges, but volunteers for each of those. And the following week, we're having the Sally Ride Reach for the Stars Festival at Rice University. And Megan Weeks, could you stand up for a second? Thank you. Megan is she's a Rice graduate, and she is going to be the coordinator for that. So if you want to, I'm going to get I'll handle one of the events on the 14th. I'll get somebody to coordinate the other, and Megan will be coordinating Sally Ride on the 21st. We're going to have more notes in next month's STS newsletter, and I guess I'll probably be calling certain people I know if they want to, or if they want to volunteer, they can call me, or you can when you get the newsletter with the information on it. So again, thank you very much for your help with the science fair and for your upcoming help with the other 3 events.
Thank you, Matt. Now I'm going to move into the community outreach. This is something that we have been doing recently. We are trying to help the community. After the Harvey storm, we decided, well, why don't we, as South Texas section, start participating more in events like this? So we started doing that, and we partnered with the Society of Petroleum Engineers. They are the leaders in this kind of events. And in February, we went to the Houston Food Bank in the east part of town. We have many things accomplished on that day. We were volunteering from 8 to almost noon, and it was really good. It was really good, and it was a very fulfilling experience. We are also planning to go in March for another event with them. It's going to be an opportunity. We are looking for volunteers in case you want to join us. We're going to go to Galveston, and we're going to clean a beach. This event is going to be called Trash Bash at Little White Oak Bayou. It's going to be on March the 24th. It's going to be from 8 to 1. In case you guys are interested, let us know so that way we can join the efforts with the Society of Petroleum Engineers. Now I would like to call Jimmy. Jimmy is going to give an announcement about the members in transition events.
Hi, my name is Jim Kamana, and I have what's called Position 4 on the local section board. The main thing that we do is we run 2 networking sessions every month. One is on the first Friday, and the other one is on the third Friday of the month. So the first Friday of the month happens to be, this month happens to be tomorrow. And Fabian Solberg, please stand. He coordinates that. That's on the west side. We've changed from the Omni, where we used to be last year. We had some problems with them. Actually, they didn't want us there. So we have now moved to the Wyndham, which is about 1 exit further west than the Omni, for those of you who know where it is. So you take I-10 and what is it? It's after Eldridge, the next exit, right? Highway 6 exit. Okay, it's at that intersection. So tomorrow's going to be the first time over there. And from now on, that's where we expect we will be. So tomorrow we have Dr. Lawrence Kramer, who's going to talk about the impact of, is it Harvey or climate change on Houston? The local effect, yeah. Okay, local impact of climate change. Then on April 6th, we have Bill Pittman, who's going to talk about 3-dimensional mapping for flame detection and gas detection leaks, gas leak detections on May 4th. This is all on the west side, okay? We have Ron Sills, who's going to talk about the future price of oil. We all want to know that, right? If only. If only. Okay. Now on the third Friday, the next one will be on March 16th. We have Dr. Thomas Ream. He's going to be talking about solutions to climate change. You know, what is the response to that and what can we do to mitigate it? On April 20, which is the next one, we have not Dr., I guess Miss or Mrs. Margaret Johnson, who's a psychologist and coach, and she's going to be talking about risk-taking at work. What kind of risks to take, what kind of risks not to take, and how you manage your career, because there's always risk. You know, how do you manage risk? So these are all pretty exciting things that are coming up. Even though this is effectively for networking and members in transition, we need members who are employed for these people to network with. So please come, okay? And we've had a lot of talks before about, you know, job writing, resume writing and interviewing techniques, but there's only so much you can say about that. So there's a mix of different topics at these meetings. We need volunteers, especially for the third Friday meeting, which is out on the east side in LaPorte at the Pipeline Grill. And put out a notice, a call for volunteers, which is on the website. It should be there. Please, we do need your help. And that's basically it. So thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you for all your hard work, Fabian. We really appreciate, because this time in the industry, there is a lot of people going through the members in transition, and it's very difficult. Sometimes this is life. We have the ups and downs, and sometimes in the downs is where you start growing, and that's where you need to bounce back and get back with more strength than ever. And And this is where you start to see progress in your career. You're going to see a lot of setbacks, and this is a good opportunity for you to learn new things. Okay, now I would like to recognize a special visitor from our headquarters. Please, Monica, stand up. Monica Mellinger is coming out of first from New York, and now she moved to another state, and I think in the Midwest. And now she's coming to our meeting, and this is a very special occasion, a very special visit from her, and she's trying to see if we are doing everything well here. And okay, thank you, Monica, for your visit. Now we would like to call Swarup Bade to introduce the Young Professionals section.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm Swarup Bade. I'm the YP chair for this year. I'm a process safety consultant with the Lloyd's Register. So before I start, I would like to share an unfortunate event which happened after our January meeting. I know we have been having a lot of discussions about process safety. In one of the refineries in India, Indian Oil Corporation, there was an explosion accident, and 2 folks died, out of which one happened to be my friend, my roommate, who I went with. It really moved. I know, like, even after so much progress in the process safety management and all this, we see these events happening. So I think it's not just the process we need to change, it's the culture too. I would like to appreciate if you can have a moment of silence in his name, Banuji Sipana, who is a great friend, a great chemical engineer too. Thank you. So moving on, first of all, I would like to congratulate all the recipients today. Actually, I would actually bribe you with one of these goodies, so that you make sure you join our YP section in future. We have a lot of events going on as a young professional group. Recently, we went to a plant tour with Slumberjay, thanks to Luis and the man behind, Carlos. He spent a lot of effort arranging these, and we have a lot more coming soon, and we'll be posting in the website and newsletter, so please stay tuned. It was a great opportunity. We get to know different type of latest technologies. We always used to think there were only a couple of separators, like centrifugal, but over there when we went, we saw some electrostatic force separators, cyclone separators. It's really amazing to see so much progress. Moving on, other events we do is a networking event. We had one organized last month. It was at the Yard House. We had a good turnout. It's one of the better places it's a very informal way to get to know each other, share your experiences, know people from, other young professionals who are in our industry. And we are planning one more in Sherlock's. Probably we'll stay tuned for the updates on that one. We'll come up with a date. And coming to the Young Professional of the Month, we usually pick one of the person who contributes for our volunteers for our group. This month, it's Srihari Maganti. Can you please stand up? And the next one would be the Young Engineer of the Year. We nominated Mr. Morgan Reed. He has some last-minute work to do, so he couldn't attend, but he said to thank everyone for nominating him from our AIChE organization. And we had a fun event at the Marriott last week, the Houston Young Engineer Award ceremony. You can see all the folks with posing hats and showing their talents. So please, this is a great opportunity. And apart from that, I would have asked everyone, just in case if you want to join the YP group, if you want updates, you can just contact me or our webmaster, Trevor Rice. Oh, he's here, so he's always there. He's the owner of the list. So make sure to join, and we hope we see you in the next meetings and next social events. Thank you. Thank you, Swaroop. And just to let you know, the Young Professionals group is open for everyone, young at heart, as well. Thank you. Okay, now we are going to move on to one of the biggest oil shows in the world. It's the Offshore Technology Conference. Our dear Tom Mann is the one who organizes most of the volunteers and most of the activities related with the South Texas section and the OTC. Come here.
Two, three, tasting. As you can see, we got a thing up here for volunteers needed. You receive a free pass, free parking, and all the junk and goodies you can carry away. Good for the entire OTC. You can attend technical sessions. You have to attend a mandatory orientation meeting and serve 4 hours or a little bit more sometimes in either arrangements, registration, student tours, or first-timers lounge orientation. The deadline for this is volunteer registration is April 10th. Sponsors are needed for goodies to prepare teacher bags and student bags. Marketing material of all kinds will be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And this is a great opportunity for everyone to attend this event. So don't forget about that. We need volunteers, and we get a stipend in case we reach 50 volunteers. So we really encourage any of the members to attend to this event. Now, we also have down the road another event similar to the previous one. Is the Arctic Technology Conference, which is going to be located at the George R. Brown here in Houston in November the 5th through the 7th. And we are calling for technical papers. They are due on March the 13th. And we also need volunteers to join the subcommittee members. So in case you are interested, if you have previous experience, or even if you don't have, but you want to learn about the topic, let us know so we can include you in the committee. Now we have awards. Tom again, come.
It's awards nomination time. Contact me at my email thing. You get that off the website. Back up one, Carlos. We have the best applied paper award. We have the best fundamental paper award for 2017. Best in practice paper award. Heat exchanger modeling or something like that, or fire safety. And then we have the 2017 Outstanding Young Professional Award. That's under 35. The Distinguished Service Award, which is over 35. And then we have Special Service Awards. They're nominating, you can nominate on the website. There's also a way to download the nomination form. We finally got that working this week. Thank you, Carlos.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Okay, just to finish this introduction for our main dinner, we have other opportunities through the South Texas section. you can be a volunteer. So we are always looking for volunteers to join us. We usually have an EXCON meeting every second Thursday. So that means when we have our monthly meeting like this meeting, we can get together next week, the following week, and we're always looking for volunteers. In case you want to be an active member, let us know so we can include you in that meeting. Also, if you have any ideas or you know someone who wants to join, let us know as well. We are also looking sometimes for venues. As we mentioned before, we used to meet at Brady's Landing. The place got flooded, so now we are looking for other new places. So we are always looking for new venues. In case your company is available and they want to host one of our meetings, we require that they have a space for 100 people, space for workshops, and the ability to carry dinner and convenient and free parking. And let us know. Let us know if you have any idea. So now we are going to have a break. We are going to have a 10 minutes, 15-minute break. So please feel free to continue networking. And then we're going to come back for our main dinner. Don't forget to, on your way out, don't forget to leave the badges. We are recycling these badges, so you can drop them down by the front desk. Thank you.
All right, let me just undo everything in this. So we can just. Okay, do you have a clicker of your own? I do. Oh, I need to. Let me mute this. Yeah. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Yep, that works. Yeah, that should work. That should work. Thanks. Yep.
It's a pleasure to me to introduce Peter Chamal. He is giving us our main presentation tonight. Peter has more than 20 years of mathematical modeling experience. He has been working through different industries: the food, pharma, nuclear, paper, gas to liquid, and base chemicals. He holds a Master of Science and a PhD degrees from TU Delft in Netherlands. In 2010, he moved to New Jersey as an applications engineer. Then in 2012, he started being the head of STS-AIChE. At the present, he is the principal applications engineer and head of STS-AIChE. Please help me welcome Peter Chamal.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to my presentation. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. When I first got the invitation to speak here, I thought we could maybe do with a good refresher course on the basics of mathematical modeling. But luckily, that thought quickly escaped my head. So I'm going to try to keep it light, and we're going to go over quite a few things, ranging from a bug to part of a country to extra food, irreversible thermodynamics, and some fake news, but we'll not make it political. So this is just a warm-up of what is about to come. As you may have seen in my title, I've changed the title a little bit, because when I first was asked to make the title, I quickly came up, well, this would be a nice topic, and let me put it on a piece of paper. But when I saw it again, maybe a week ago, I was really like, yeah, that's a little bit too presumptuous. And I didn't clarify that I'm going to talk about mathematical modeling. Because in our headquarters in London, where I worked for a while, there was actually a proper modeling agency, so beautiful women walking around. And we would always try to say, well, we're in modeling too, but we couldn't convince them. We didn't have the looks. And the other thing is obviously the then, now, and expected is really from my perspective. I'm going to jump back a little bit further than my experience, and I'm sure that is clear. I'm actually going to jump back almost, or maybe even more than the 75 years that this sector exists. So if we look at the beginning of, I should give one important disclaimer. This presentation is my views, my ideas, and my opinions, and I work for PSE, but they're my opinions. So if you've got any problems with them, talk to me, not to my boss. And as I said, I'm going to give perspectives, and obviously, depending on where you stand, things may look very differently. But hopefully, you will understand the perspective I'm taking. So if we start way back, before the era of computers, we only had pen and paper, basically. So the whole trick was to write down a set of equations that you knew you could solve by using dimensionless numbers, usually the steady state, even though there was interest in dynamics. But if you find the steady states, you actually divide up your dynamic space. So you know, okay, this is the steady state, so to the left of it, it may be stable behavior, so it's going to the steady state. And on the right of it, it may be unstable behavior. So in that way, they learned about systems. And one of the leaders in this field is Aris Rutherford, so I took some of his pages from his book. And actually, when I started my PhD, this is what I started reading. So you write down some variables, you define, usually simplifying conditions. So to give you an idea, if diffusion is not really important, you can, forget about that term, and then you can solve the problem in one way, and then you add diffusion, and then you can solve the problem in another way. So in that way, you would get different models, and actually this picture is on the front of his book. So they basically would say, okay, for different purposes and different conditions, we just built different models. And then you would try to make bifurcation studies, again, to split it up the dynamic space and find out, okay, I should stay on this side for operations. The models were typically quite small, and the art of modeling, because today it's still an art, and we'll see that hopefully throughout the presentation, is trying to express the model in a form that can be solved without the use of a computer. Then things changed drastically when the computer was introduced. All of a sudden we could do a lot more things. And ever since that moment, modeling has been progressing basically at the pace of computers. And I have never worked with a punched card, but just yeah, we have some in the audience. Yeah, exactly. It's impressive. So I feel a bit humbled because my supervisor, my thesis supervisor, he also worked with it, and he would always tell me, "Well, you are so lazy with your memory." I didn't care about memory. We have all the memory, and in those days, you really had to be careful how you use the memory because it was very, very limited. And this is a punch card for a very, very simple model. But like always, we humans, we push the boundary. So all of a sudden, we were able to solve pretty impressive problems, actually. And for those who, I haven't seen this computer, but these computers were really, really, really big. So the first one was actually built here in the US, in Pennsylvania. And the ENIAC was the first one. And I'm going to cheat a little bit because it stands for Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. And as you can see, these things were massive. They were absolutely massive. And now the bug comes in. Because the reason we call software issues a bug is because in those days, bugs would literally get into the system and would fry a circuit, and they would literally have to search for the bug. So the calculations took very long. My supervisor would tell me, I would hand it in the evening, and then the next day I would have a result, and then I found out I made a silly mistake, and then I had to wait until the next evening. And so things were progressing at a very different pace than they do nowadays. And the size of the models could be quite impressive. It was all a matter of the art in this case was getting as much out of the little RAM that was available. So now we're getting a little bit closer to where I started using computers, and my dad luckily was very early into computers. I remember at home we had the 8-inch floppy disks, for those people who know what a floppy disk is. And I'm sure there's quite a few here. So at that time, it was a lot of bespoke solutions. So people would write their own little program, code it in. Fortran and C++ were born. There were obviously other languages that were built. So very specific. There were some early investigations in the general solvers. The early CFD, actually, I didn't know this, but I researched it a little bit. DOS command prompt programs. Spreadsheets were coming into life. And here it was actually finding the suitable software or program to solve your problem. And if you look at, so here we see in blue, we see the RAM memory. So today we're at, completely different areas than where they started. And the hard disk space. And I remember one day my dad wanted to buy what we now would call a laptop. It was, quite a solid thing. But it had a hard disk of 20 megabytes. And the salesman, he said, never in your lifetime will you ever fill this computer. And it's so funny. My dad and we sometimes recount that story. And little did we know what we now are sending in an email. Then in the 1990s, this is where I started really doing some modeling. The flow sheet packages came in, steady state flow sheeting, different packages. CFD started to come into its own, so to speak. And there were also some custom modeling tools. And I was the secretary of the computer-aided process engineering platform in the Netherlands. And they kept a website with all the software packages that were available for custom modeling. And that we were talking about, I couldn't find the website anymore, it doesn't exist anymore, but it was in the order of 100, let's say it like that. Not hundreds, but literally 100 different pieces of software. And at that time, our company, PSE, has developed a software called GPROMS. There was just one in the list, so I heard about it. But now, one key thing started to arrive, and that was the way to solve the problem. So I'm going to explain that a little bit. One is called sequential modular, and the other is simultaneous. And the art at this time was really trying to solve the most complex flow sheet that you could do, and for custom modeling, okay, which tool would do it the best. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. Now, just to give you an idea, there's different packages for each of the types of solutions. So these were the two big types of solutions that were followed by the industry. As you can see, are typical flow sheeting packages and some of the equation-oriented approach packages, among which are software, but also others, Aspen Custom Modeler, Aspen Plus in EO mode, and Romeo. So what's the difference? Well, in a traditional sequential modular approach, if you start solving the problem, you go through your sources, you can easily do that, and then there's a recycle, so you don't know what the recycle is, so you make a guess, then you can solve your reactor, and then you can go through your flow sheet, and then finally you get an update of your recycle, and then you can keep on iterating. So you solve it in sequence, and you iterate around until the recycle loop converges. In contrast, in equation-oriented approach, you take all these equations and you solve them all at the same time. Now, that's a big difference, obviously, and each of them has their advantages and disadvantages. So traditional sequential modular are very easy to use and very robust, especially if you just have a straight no recycle. This works really, really well. But for large-scale systems and complex recycles, heat integration, those kind of things, it becomes quite difficult. And also if you wanted to include more complex models, think about multi-scale modeling or multi-dimensional. Now, the problem with this type of solution, if you solve everything at the same time, where do you start? So if I have this recycle, I know where to start, and I can just give it a go, and then it will improve itself. And we at PSE have solved this problem probably now 6 years ago, which is very nice because now we can have multiple solutions from the same model, both steady state and dynamic simulation, optimization, parameter estimation, back to front. Because if you solve everything at the same time, it becomes very easy to exchange things. But nothing is for free. We all know that. So if you have a problem, if it's solving everything at the same time, then obviously, where's the problem? So that is something that is a little bit harder in these kind of packages. Now, just to give you an idea that indeed these kind of packages now can solve the typical problems that you would find in steady state flow sheeting packages. But in this case, we can also do the dynamics. And this can be very heat integrated, a big crude distillation unit, air separation unit, big ethylene plant, and this is pressure swing absorption. The other field that we are quite active in is actually in formulated products, so this is for the pharma industry. And obviously nobody is going to draw a flow sheet that looks like this, but this we just made to show that we can do this. So we can connect the initial reaction into a continuous crystallizer, some milling, some extrusion, some drying, and some mixing, pelleting, coating and pelleting, and then you can even throw it into your stomach. With the big vision that we laid out, it's like, okay, well, if we can really do this, and we're not there entirely yet, obviously, we can actually say, well, we have a problem in the human body. What should we do here to fix that problem? But we're talking quite a bit away. Now, I want to go over a couple of things, because as you noticed, I've extended my history a little bit. So I wanted to go over a couple of things that I did in my lifetime. So it started for me in 1994, where I modeled this particular unit. It's a sinter process. So what happens is you have pellets coming in, you dry them, you sinter them, and then you cool them and you use the air to dry. So there's a recycle. Now, at the time, as you can see, the model is a partial differential equation, so it means I take into account changes in this direction. It was 500 equations, and at the time they were like, are you nuts? You know, are you trying to solve this? Nowadays, it's a piece of cake. Everybody can do this. Then in 1998, I was a bit ambitious. I wanted to do a model of a falling film column with a moving boundary and all that. That wasn't possible, so I had to go to a simpler solution, so that point doesn't show up on this list, because it would literally be down there somewhere. And during my PhD, I looked at a big chemical plant from Shell, dynamic model, a partial differential algebraic equation, 25,000 equations, which took minutes to solve. It always depends on what you really want to do. But even at that time, they were like, are you crazy? 25,000 equations, you're nuts. And as you can see, over my career, this last point is not mine, to be fair. You know, the models just have grown. And it's because the computer power became bigger and bigger, and we just like to challenge the computer, basically, get as far as we can get. Okay. So what are today's capabilities? And it's actually a very long list, as you can imagine, but I figured I would give you a flavor of the things that you can do. People are now quite a few are doing parallel computing, cloud computing, tracking of uncertainties. So here we see an example, completely axis removed, of a molecular weight distribution in a polymer, but it's a two-dimensional molecular weight distribution. And that turned out to be very important for the behavior of this plastic. So it was a new plastic that was invented, didn't work as they expected in the pilot plant compared to the lab. And only by doing this, you can find the solution. Obviously, when we started modeling this, we didn't immediately discover that or think of that. But web-based deployment, and here's an example of multi-scale modeling, where in a reactor you have got pellets, and you can actually look inside the pellet or have a film on top of the pellet, which is important if you look at the Fischer-Tropsch process, for instance. Now, I want to briefly go over a couple of examples what can be done today. And the first example, this is where the part of the country comes in. So this is a paper by these people that was published in 2016. This is the southern part of Iraq, where there's different gas processing units that are all interconnected. And as you can see, there was significant flaring occurring. And one of the reasons is it was a very big network. It's very difficult to model that. So each of the units was trying to do its best on its own, but not thinking if the other unit would have overcapacity. So this is this model of this southern part of Iraq, with all the relevant models behind it, so the different regions. And this model was about 300,000 nonlinear algebraic equations, so a steady state model. Here we have compressor stations in trains, so that's a sub-flow sheet in this flow sheet. The NGL plant, the LPG plant, and pipelines, and obviously compressors. So this is all behind this model. And we optimize this because we obviously want to make money. That's what we're after. But they were also interested in maximize the total production, maximize the propane yield, and minimizing of flaring. So they had different objectives depending on how they were operating. Now, when you do an optimization, you need to use decision variables to change your objective, to make this more profitable. And as you can see, we had a total, in this case, of 77 decision variables. Now, there's no way that we, by trial and error, would be able to handle 77 decision variables. I'm sure everybody agrees. And on top of that, we had a number of constraints on compression duty, flooding velocities, and product specifications. So if you would try to solve this by hand or by trial and error, you wouldn't get very far. And these are the results that we obtained for this particular case study. Now, you know that we're talking about a lot of money for these 4 gas processing plants. So when we say 5%, to some it may seem as a objectively, if somebody tells you 5%, that's not much, but for these kind of things, it's obviously massive. So what we did here, we did network-wide rigorous optimization using first principle models. So we take into account all the systems interactions and all the degrees of freedom. So it's not just one plant, it's a network of systems. We don't do trial and error. We use a rigorous mathematical approach to find the minimum. And then finally, we're using first principle models. And first principles is in quotes because especially if you talk to scientists, first principles are the Schrödinger equations, and obviously we're talking about mass-energy balance, and we have a lot of empirical relations in the models. Sometimes they call them gray box models. The second example I'm going to discuss is model-based process monitoring. So if we have our plant with our control system, we typically store the plant data somewhere, and we can pick up this data and condition it because there's maybe faults or a sensor is not working. I may do some data reconciliation, so to make sure that the measurements are consistent. And once I have done that, I can start to look at the state estimation. Because if I've got a model running, then I want to match the plant with, or the model with my plant, then obviously I need to find out where the plant is. And that is done through a technique called state estimation. And that means that we get an update of the model and the current plant state. So we know this is, or to the best of our knowledge, because there's always uncertainties, where the plant is. And once we have that, we can do a whole range of things. You can do optimization, advanced control, model predictive control, economic model predictive control. You can do decision support for future scenario testing, and obviously monitoring and diagnosing, because all of a sudden, all the variables in your plant, you have an estimate for. So what I'm going to focus on here is only an example for this part. And this has to do with olefin plants. So if you look at all the things you can do in an olefins plant, there's quite a bit. So first you can take a look at the cracking furnace and the online yield accounting and monitoring of coking. Coking is an important phenomena, but what is the degree of coking? And a model like, with the capabilities of the state estimation, you can actually start to estimate that. And we'll see some examples of that. Then you could look at C2 and C3 hydrogenation for yield improvement. You can look at the refrigeration and compression. And then finally, you could also say, you know what, this is also all connected. Why don't we optimize this whole thing? Because if I change something here, that obviously affects everything downstream from that. So I need to make sure that if I improve this, that actually the train behind it can handle it. So as I said, I'm going to focus on the furnaces. What we really want to know is what are the ethylene and propylene yields, because we want to make sure that we get as much money out of this thing as we possibly can. But it's difficult to get reliable data. So you can only take it some way downstream because of high temperatures, light olefins dissolve in condensed stream, instrument often faulty or out of service. So how are you going to control this? And then there's this nice phenomena of coking, which basically creates or forces the reduced heat transfer, which leads to higher metal skin temperature and an increasing pressure drop, which is not good for your furnace. Because that means lower efficiency, loss of yield, and obviously potential, the worst case is potential coil damage, and then you have downtime. You have to literally shut down, remove the coil, and throw in a new coil. So the first approach you could do is say, well, you know, I've got this nice piece of simulation software. I build a model of it, and as a starting point, I can start with no coke, and then I'm just going to see what happens. I can simulate that. But, and we'll come back to this, it assumes a perfect model, and especially with coking, I mean, that's one of the things where we need empirical relations, because that is something that is not fully described by first principles yet. So what happens is that initially I may get a good fit for the pressure drop, and here we see the ethylene at the outlet. But over time, this coking is changing the way the plant is behaving, and I start to drift from what my real plant is doing. Obviously, if all of a sudden I don't know exactly anymore where my plant is, how can I optimize it? You can't. So the second approach is where you use this state estimation, and basically you also use some redundant measurements that are available. So some things that you measure are not that certain. So you can actually say, well, I use them as a measurement, but I'm actually going to update them to what I think is a more appropriate value for the particular measurement. And for those who are familiar with the extended Kalman filter, this is the size of the problem that we solve here. But for those who are enjoying their dinner and more interested in beautiful graphs, the key thing here is that now all of a sudden you can see that we're basically on top of the measurements. And we can start to track the total coke deposition in the furnace and in the tube, which then goes into the run length, and we can really optimize the plant. So what we did here was real-time monitoring using self-calibrating first principles, again, between quote, models. So in this case, we consider these models to be moderately large models, because as you saw on the graph previously, we've reached a 1 million equation case, and these models are typically smaller. We have, it's self-calibrating for the coking kinetics and the degree of coking mostly, to know what the degree of coking is. And the first principle, obviously it means mass and energy balances are satisfied. And with these accurate estimates, we can now have a good basis to do, if we wanted to, whole plant optimization, or just use it as a detection mechanism to identify, hey, there's a problem in my furnace because the coking is going up really quickly. Now, finally, so we've discussed a little bit the past, my past, what is possible today, and I'm going to give you a glimpse of what is going to happen. It's mostly actually the community, but I added some things that I think will happen, and I'll tell you why. You always got to think big. In the control world, what would happen, there would be different levels of control. So this is the base layer of control, and then we have model predictive control, dynamic real-time optimization, scheduling and planning, and this just indicates at what time they're mostly active. So this is in the minute range, this is an hour range, days range, month range. And we have these different levels, but they're all basically trying to do the same. So what we are seeing, and this is the community is doing this already, they're starting to merge this, because the reason this was split up is because we couldn't solve it quickly enough. So we see that these divisions are blurring. But that means if this is blurring, then we need to have models that can cover all of this. And that is actually quite important, because if we look at a maybe quite typical result, where we have a plant and somebody says, okay, the top management says, hey, I want more production. Then the manager of the plant manager may look at this Excel spreadsheet and he say, hey, I'm crunching my numbers, and yeah, looks good, go ahead. But the plant operator says, no, my experience, we have to be safe, we're not able to run it. They tend to be more safe, and rightfully so, because they obviously, something goes wrong, it's often their head. The plant engineer may run some software package, and he may decide, yeah, everything looks good, go. And then they ask the scientist, and he gets out his book, does a complicated model, and he comes to the conclusion, no, we cannot do it. So what do? I mean, you have a problem. So instead, what you want to do, ideally, for a part based on the scientist, maybe not everything, but for a part based on the scientist or your research department, you develop models that are going to be used by everybody, and you package them up whatever way you want. And then your plant manager may look at this model through a web interface. He just punches in some numbers, clicks a play button, and he gets a result. Yeah, works, good. The plant operator now has access to this model as well, and he can see maybe an operator trainer simulator, a kind of screen which mimics the plant and the way he can control it. He can play with it, and he comes back, yeah, it looks good. And then the flowsheet engineer may use a package and come to the conclusions, yes, everything looks good. And then obviously you're in a good shape. So this is where we need to go if the control community is changing. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard of the role of big data, and I'm using big data in a bit of a loose term because strictly speaking, it's literally a lot of data that you may do something with. Here I'm talking about a much wider range of usage. And we all know this, if we enter a search term in Google, boom, within milliseconds, we have an answer, which is absolutely amazing. And behind the scene, it's a neural net that, or deep learning, and I'm capturing this all under big data. I know this is being recorded, so I may get some angry calls like Mr. Small. Could you never do that again? But this is a trend that has a lot of value, and in our community, we definitely can take the benefits for it, because we have empirical models. We have them for a reason, and I think big data has a role to play. But we should also be careful, because they are not based on physical insight. So if you would have a perfect model that would track the plant, it may give very good predictions. But if you would try to find out why things are happening, you wouldn't be able. By looking at the model. By playing with it, yes, you can get the same feeling, because it's behaving in the right way. But yeah, you don't know what is going on. And I attended a training course or a workshop at FOCAPO where they had a very nice workshop. And the thing that stuck with me was that a nice phrase, big data is right most of the time, which is great, but if we're talking about safety, we will gotta be right all of the time. So I think big data will play a role in non-safety critical operation. And I think we'll see that role increase. Now, there's a whole range of other types of models, because I've been talking about first principles models and steady state or flow sheeting models, which are also first principle models. They're based on mass and energy balances. And at the ACC spring meeting in 2017, we published a paper together with Nick Sainidis' group at Carnegie Mellon to roughly give a feeling for where these models lie. Let me go one step back. What we really want is we have very high interpretability accuracy, very high extrapolability accuracy, low complexity, and the coloring indicates how fast it solves. So ideally, that's where we want to be. And if you look at all these techniques, and obviously this is my interpretation, and you can argue a lot of whether some needs to be shifted somewhere, but this is having worked a little bit in this area and worked with Nick, this is my interpretation of where things lie. So we have some room for improvement, and I think machine learning has a role to play there. It's very impressive what it's doing. But again, typically machine learning, what does it mean? Instead of just estimating the parameters, what we do for the first principle models, we actually also estimate the form of the equations. So it's not a mass balance or an energy balance where we have some kinetic parameters. No, it's actually, is it a sine function, or is it a square function, or a square root? And obviously that also means that understanding these models, when you would get these models, is a little bit more difficult. Finally, some funny trends. Over time, if you would try to plot, and please excuse my freewheeling a little bit here, we've been initially interested mostly in steady-state models, and then at one point somewhere, the interest in dynamics started to increase. Obviously, steady-state is still very prevalent. So the interest in the model looks something like this. But something funny is actually going on, because in the early days, to find that first solution for the steady state was so difficult that they typically would build a dynamic model and just run it for a very long time, and then they would find the steady state. So this is kind of back to the past instead of back to the future, which I found, I always have found this an interesting behavior. So yes, we make dynamic models, but we want to solve something steady state, and now we're interested in the dynamics. The second trend is an interesting one, and I'll come to some the food part, some extra food for thought. I'll give that away. If you look at the amount of understanding we have in modeling, initially it was very, very good, because they had to pull all kinds of tricks out of the box. And you had to set up your mass and energy balances. You had to do some smart tricks to reduce the model. But over time, software became so good that who would need to know how to model? And obviously, again, this is a bit of a simplification, but we see that the understanding of software increased drastically with the advent of computing, but the understanding of modeling went down. And I think, obviously, I've got a modeling background, so I'm definitely very biased, but I think that is starting to become worrying, and our customers are starting to say these things explicitly. So here's the food for thought, and this is a step away. Assuming that our capability to learn is limited. We get born as a baby and we only can learn so much. But all the different fields are progressing and progressing and progressing. So how do we decide what we teach our engineers? That's a very difficult question, and especially if you would put I'm going to throw it on myself, me in a room with, let's say, a reaction engineer. The reaction engineers know reaction engineering is the heart of the process. You cannot do without. I say, well, to understand the process, you really need modeling. And probably we're both right. But how do you do that mix? And that's not an easy thing to solve. And this, I'm going to take a bit of a wild jump here, because one of my hobbies is irreversible thermodynamics. And what the irreversible thermodynamics, in a very blunt way, or between very thick quotes, says is, okay, the larger the forces, or the difference in the potential of something, the larger the losses are, so entropy generation. And the deepening of many of these scientific fields actually makes it more difficult for these people to communicate with each other. So we become almost isolated on our little islands, and I'm sure that's happening to me as well. But here comes the fake news. I think this actually also has at least been somewhat of an enabling factor in the success of fake news. The fact that people, they just cannot follow everything anymore. It's so specific. You have to have so much knowledge that people at one point just say, I cannot follow this anymore. I'm just going to follow someone that I trust, whether that's the right person or not. Okay. Some other trends that where actually before I started, somebody asked, okay, can you give me a 5-minute overview of your presentation, because I'm not sure I'm gonna make it to the end of the night. And we actually discussed this a little bit. So one thing we obviously see, if we increase the complexity, especially from the early days, we see a significant improvement in accuracy. There's a question of how accurate does it need to be? That's a separate, important, different question. But if you would look at the prediction of your key performance indicators, I believe, yes, they will have this trend. But by adding more and more phenomena, I showed you the example of the catalyst palette, where we know we have to take the film into account in the Fischer-Tropsch process. But do we really know the film thickness? Do we have a real idea of how thick that needs to be? No, of course not. But we still see that we have a much better accuracy up there. So while we're increasing the complexity, at one point we should be careful not to think that the phenomena that we are modeling are really like that. So observability is a big problem. So what is observable and what additional measurements and data analytic techniques do we need? And I think there's, especially in the data analytics, I think there could be some improvements. We see that in the pharma industry, just as a sidestep. In the pharma industry, they do a fantastic job in data analytics and statistics compared to us, the standard chemical engineering industry. But the models they're working on are very simple compared to the models that we work on. So I think there's a big opportunity for the chemical engineering to get way more information out of the data. Then one thing that there was actually at the AIChE meeting in San Francisco, during one of the breaks I spoke to one of the exhibitors, and he had a very cool valve cut open. I always like that, you can look inside and see how the valve is working. So I got to speak to him, and his daughter was studying medicine, and he said that they are learning now in medicine, and I don't know if there's any medicine, but virtual. So you put on a virtual glasses and you kind of see, you can go strip down to the human body, look at the muscles, look at the, like shown here. And I think we already have this for plants. I don't know if you, these exhibitions you see, you obviously can walk through the plant, you can turn a valve, etc. But I think that there's a big role to play in, for operator training is already being used, but also for teaching, to teach our students, okay, this is what a plant looks like. This is the real size, is the real thing. Going to the control and the dynamics, everything is already starting to get more connected, and we're seeing plants that are now updating their behavior based on the market dynamics, utilities, optimization, contracts negotiation, all these kind of things, and taking into consideration uncertainties. That has a little bit to do, obviously, with the statistics. But the difficulty there is, if you look at, we started looking into uncertainties a long time ago. I would have to dig up the first papers, but talking about the 1990s. But it adds to the dimensionality of the problem. So it's almost like if you have a reactor in one dimension and you add the radial direction, then you have 2 dimensions. And every uncertainty that you add is kind of a probability distribution, so you add a whole dimension to your problem. And this means that we can increase the complexity of our models much faster at the moment than computer power is growing, let's say it like that. And then online applications will be while you're walking next to the plant with your pad, and you can, this is what's going on in the plant right now. Oh, let me zoom in there. All that I'm sure is coming. Then this has to do with the improved analytics. I know nothing about this, to be absolutely clear. But I'm always fascinated by the fact that at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, they get these very noisy little peaks of data hidden in a signal somewhere, and they can make accurate predictions statistically. And then when I look at what we do, and especially, I've been there, you get a signal from the plant, and it's okay, poop, straight line, move on. but there might be a lot more information in there. Combined product, process, operational, and control design under uncertainty. Yeah, that's something that because we cannot do this at the moment. So we either do a process and maybe operational design, but including the control design at the same time is still a very, I think, under uncertainty, makes it more difficult, and including the product. So for instance, if I do CO2 capture, what should be the molecular structure of my solvent that I'm using to capture the CO2? We're starting to be able to do these kind of things. And this technology is out there, basically. And then, obviously, I mean, it's a long way, but the quantum computer, I mean, that would be a giant leap in speeds. There's a lot of problems still that needs to be solved, and I know nothing about it, so I'm going to keep it at that. Now, the other way to look at this, and this is, there's quite a few slides from Kostas that I've used. Kostas Pantoulidis is our managing director. But he likes to think of the modeling in this way. Thinking along the axis of model application, so from concept to front-end engineering design, equipment design, all the way to operations. The scale that you're looking at, so from the particle all the way to supply chain or product function, and the level of detail, and one of them you can express in a number of dimensions. And you could place each type of software that we have now in this box and actually see, okay, well, steady-state flow sheeting is typically on the plant and unit level, but it's typically lumped, so it's lying somewhere in this area. And then you got CFD, which obviously is 3D, and it's in the detailed engineering equipment design area. So you can complete each of the types of software in this box. And obviously, in a perfect world, we will be able to cover everything with one piece of software. And you see these kind of things happening as CFD is starting to add reactions, multi-phase phenomena. We're starting to go to higher dimensions. Flow sheeting is getting more complex, so that is something that is going on. And I forgot to mention that there's a little twist, but the people I spoke to at the beginning, they actually hit it right on the nose when they said there. I don't see them anymore, but the people who were there, they probably will recognize this. But first, I think modeling is still evolving, and it will remain dependent on the computational power that is available to us. We human beings, we try to get the max out of what we can, and there's a lot of value still to be gained. There's a lot of questions, obviously also, but I think there's a lot of value still to be gained, and we see that every day almost. But we also need to keep the perspective. So coming back to my initial figure, there's a very important quote by George Box that we keep in the back of our mind. All models are wrong and some are useful. And it's very important to keep that in mind. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I would like to acknowledge Kostas and Mark.
Thank you, Peter. And we would like to have a couple of questions, maybe 3. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand so I can give you the microphone.
I'm going to preface my question. I come from the process safety field. And typically when you model this is for optimization. And that's because that has the largest economic return. But you're talking about modeling in first principles. What's the range of that? Will that cover startup of a process? Will that cover shutdown of the process? You know, how much can you do that? Will that cover suddenly, in the dynamics, sudden failure of a component? So that's my question.
Yeah, very good question. Thank you. So in that sense, at this day and age, we still work a little bit along the ARIS model. So the models that we have in our package, or any flow sheeting package for that matter, or tool, are typically for normal operation conditions. But we build models for customers that do handle these kind of situations. So we have models of blowdown, for instance, dynamic models, tracking a cold front moving through the system. What happens if you add extra things? So, but these models are typically more specific for that goal. And that brings me back to one thing that was on the slides, but I forgot to mention. That is, let me go back because it's not too far back. Here, adaptive models, I didn't discuss it. One of the things that we are looking into is to say, okay, if a certain phenomena occurs on the fly while the simulation is running, we need a more detailed model, so let's switch to a more detailed model on the fly. Because we don't want to go model everything very detailed because it just becomes too complex. So we have done startup, we do those kind of simulations, but yeah, it's typically still more like the RS model where it's really a specialized model. Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question here.
Which solver you use to solve the model? You have your own solver, or you use commercial solver like Cplex or Baron or the Antigon?
Yeah, if my boss is watching, he will tell me, Peter, you clearly didn't do a good job of introducing your company. I'm with PSE, the Process System Engineering. We have our own software called GPROMS, the GPROMS platform. We've got two tools, GPROMS Process Builder and GPROMS Model Builder, formulated products. So those are the tools that were used for most of the case examples that I showed. Yeah, so, the flow sheeting tools, I mean, they can do the flow sheeting. There's lots of commercial tools out there, but yeah, it's all commercial tools.
Okay, one last question.
It's less of a question, but more of a comment. I like your definition of that fake news. Can we go back to that slide? And the definition of the irreversible thermodynamics.
Yes.
So if we say fake news, not necessarily as wrong news, I mean incorrect news, but that it could be true or it could be false,
yep.
That it cannot be proven with certainty, then really this big data and this irreversible thermodynamics and fake news has been going on in history for a long time. There's a big discipline on it, and it's called religion.
Yeah.
Don't lose any sleep over it.
When I introduced that I would talk about fake news, I deliberately said I'm going to stay away from politics, but I'm also going to stay away from religion. But yeah, especially because it's being recorded. But thanks for the comment. Yeah.
Historically, in attempting to implement these large-scale models, the problem has been maintaining them online, and it requires typically quite experienced and educated staff to maintain the models. And so as a result, there was a lot of work in the 90s on trying to put this in, but those models fell into disuse because the typical process plant could not maintain them. How has that changed today?
Yeah, very, very good question. And that's a problem that we try to address, and actually other packages have these same capabilities. So the way we look at it is that we say, okay, well, there's lots of pieces of equipment that are so standard that you could use a library. We call them libraries. So those are standard models that we maintain, we sell to our customers, and we make sure that we update them. But for each plan to match it with reality, you will typically need some customization. And that customization is what you as the owner would own. And thereby we're trying to reduce the amount of maintenance that you need to do. But it's absolutely true. Because we sometimes get these bespoke solutions. The worst I've had, I'm obviously not going to name the company, but they came to us and they said, okay, well, we have this Fortran model, and we don't have the source code anymore. We just have some printouts of part of the code, and here's the code. And I'll tell you even more funny story. Because they said, typically then the customer says, okay, we want to make sure that you can replicate this. And we always tell them, I mean, we can do that, but we always find issues. So in this particular case, the heat duties that were predicted by the model were completely off, like orders of magnitude. So we were working with the research department. No, this model is really good. You need to implement this. And we said, okay, can we please talk to the engineers? So finally we had the meeting with the engineers. And the engineers started saying, oh, this model, we love it. It's so good. We really need to have this capability. So I asked them, okay, but what about the duties? And the engineer immediately says, oh, the duties, we don't look at that. That's crap. And the research guy was like, what? So yeah, the maintainability is an issue, and that will remain an issue. But yeah, as I said, we try to resolve it by having the standard stuff like valves and pumps. And I should also maybe mention that in our software, the model is completely decoupled from the solution methodology. So you can write the equations like you would write on a piece of paper in our code, but it would be easy to read. You don't have to worry about which needs to be solved, the order of the equations, the form of the equations. And that means that we take care of the solution. So the maintenance also becomes easier. So some of these customers for which we have done that, they literally said this is like model documentation, because it's so easy to read it. So hopefully that will help, but you will need to maintain it, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, for additional questions, we are going to stick around a little bit more, but thank you everybody for your attention. Thank you, Peter, for your presentation.
Thank you.